Hi,
Hello.
you're in some lovely place. I can hear wind chimes and all.
That's my house. Oh, you can take a look. That's my garden.
Nice.
And
Oh, it's lovely. We have got some good weather for change in Chennai today.
uh, we are in the back end of a cyclone,
I know.
so you can see my hawa mein udte baal and all that.
Full heroine only, Bhavi.
See, I've tried. I've genuinely tried, but the last time I tried, you've seen my reel. The dupatta just did not want to fly. I tried. I had nice snow-capped mountains. I had a good backdrop, but the dupatta did not fly.
It's beautiful today.
Thankfully, it's not raining. We have some sun, but we have a good wind. Let's see. The cyclone otherwise has been quite confused, wasn't sure where it wanted to go.
But Kutch was pretty badly affected, right?
Yeah. Has gone towards Rajasthan now, I guess. Alrighty, we have not a lot of people right now. Maybe people are still sleepy or joining.
It's Sunday morning.
Yeah. But it's 11 o'clock, yeah. People should be awake right now.
You know, it's pretty. It's good. So we call it. You've been to Chennai, right? Never. Oh, okay.
Never.
Oh, okay.
I want to. I really want to. But then there's a lot of. See, I want to go all over the world. My bank account does not agree.
Well, true for most of us who want to travel. So
And also my employers do not quite agree.
that's
So
that's another problem for another day.
yeah.
You know, the reason I ask that is in Chennai when it's drizzling and it's like a little not too sunny weather, I call it the ECR weather. So ECR is the East Coast Road, which
Yes.
is the coast, and it's beautiful. So today we have ECR weather.
Nice.
So I
I
guess
was just talking to my mom this morning about Dhanush Kodi and all that, like how it was destroyed in a storm. I was also listening to a podcast about a couple who keeps traveling all over India, and they had been to Dhanush Kodi. So it was like it's very eerie because you have an abandoned church, you have abandoned houses, and it's just a thin strip of land. I mean, you are entirely at the mercy of the forces of nature.
yeah. But it's beautiful in a way. There's also a Tarangambadi, a Tranquebar, which used to be a Dutch colony, and then it's not exactly abandoned, but tsunami destroyed a lot of it. So it's just like 7 streets that's left. Some
Yeah.
beautiful architecture. That's also worth visiting. I mean, if you go to Pondicherry, it's worth going to that place.
Yes. Anyways, we can always keep talking. We never have a dearth of topics and things to talk about. So let us begin today's live. For most of us, when we say cheese, the popular image that pops up in most of our heads is maybe a cheese cube or a cheese slice or a block of cheese, maybe a moule, maybe Britannia, whatever you locally eat, but most likely something associated with a processed cheese. It has that typical bitterish flavor, and people don't agree that it's bitterish, but it is actually bitterish. You ask somebody it's not from India to taste it, they'll say it's bitter, right?
And the salt.
And yeah, and it's shredded on top of pizzas or sandwiches. Numerous food items are loaded and drowned beneath blocks of cheese, and that's not what cheese is in its entirety. And who better to talk about it than my favorite cheesemaker and a very dear friend who gives the best introductions to me, to anybody. We have with us Namrata. Namrata, first of all, tell people how to pronounce your brand. That is very important.
Kase.
What is
Kase.
Kase?
German and Dutch for cheese, So when we started making cheese, it was a bunch of experiments that we were doing. We had not thought of a name, and we were just working out. A friend had very kindly offered his cafeteria space post lunch for us to run our experiment. And while we were still at it, one fine day we get a call from Karen Anand's team for a farmers market they were doing in Chennai. And so I was like, okay, we need a name. So this friend who had given us his cafeteria, he was like, he had stayed for in Germany for a couple of years. So like the first cheese you guys tried was a quark. So if you know quark is a very curd-like soft cheese, very common in Germany. So it's like you should call yourselves Käse. Like okay, sounds good enough. Let's run with it, and that's exactly how it happened.
So people, it is not Kase cheese, it is not Kase cheese, it is, say
Käse.
it for me one more time.
Käse.
Kase.
But you know what, Bhavya, over the years I've realized that it's a great sort of icebreaker and good thing because the most common thing is case.
Yes.
We call it Kase, case, Kase, somebody said once. Somebody also said Kasi. And somebody called up. This is the early days and somebody said Kasi and I said, sorry, wrong number. Because I thought they were asking me my name and then I realized, oh, it must be Kaiser. And then we had this, still have dude, eat more cheese, right? So I think it became a bit of a thing where people started calling us eat more cheese and not really Kaiser because everybody was confused
At least
what it is.
didn't say Kaise eat more cheese.
So we have had all of that. And it's all right. It's a great way to start a conversation as well.
Yeah. All right. So what inspired you to start cheese making? Because I'm pretty sure you didn't grow up thinking I'm going to grow up and I will make cheese.
No. I'm often told you're living a dream. I never dreamt of becoming a cheesemaker. I mean, in fact, that was not even a career option. So for me, I worked in the space of international business, trade and investment. So there was a fair amount of travel. I was exposed to a lot of food, and food has always been an area of interest. Every year I would work on a business plan thinking, okay, like a little book cafe, chef's table. I mean, chef's table sounds fancy now. I wrote a business plan for it 15 years back. Cooking trails and doing culinary travel and all those kind of things. So there was always an idea to work with food. I think for most of us, for all of us, food has numerous memories. Some of our best memories are triggered from food. It's our one true thing that we connect with at least for one major meal time or 3 times in a day, whatever it is. People bond over food. So there's always this thing to do something about food. I've been fascinated by it. Cheese was never something in the horizon. I was exposed to cheese making for the first time when I was in Kunur. This lovely place called Acres Wild, which is run by the filmmaker Sultan. Unfortunately, I think they have closed down post-COVID.
Yes.
While I was there, I was just taking a break. I was there for about 10 days. It was a monsoon, so the only thing I could do was walk up and down the mountain. It was really beautiful. And then I realized they had
wind in the hair flying.
It was just lovely. And they had, if I'm not wrong, at that point they had 13 cows. And they 13 cows, 13 cows at the farm. And they used to make their own cheese. And Tina, Mansoor's wife, used to run cheese making course for people. But it's like a fun, hands-on thing. There was a lady called Mary who used to make most of the cheese. So I learned a feta and a mozzarella. But for me at that point, it was like, you know what, I go back home and make some cheese for my next dinner and my guests are going to be really impressed. That's all. It was never for starting a business. But a couple of months later, I was talking to Anu, who's my business partner at Kase, and Anu is a social worker. So she works with a group of people who are differently abled and trains them on different job skills. So she was talking to me as like a foodie friend and asking me, there are a bunch of girls and these are young girls who are in their early 20s who don't complete their graduation, hearing impaired. Can we have a little setup for baking? And do you think it's a good idea? At that point, I knew that Chennai had a whole lot of home bakers, really talented, But the way it works is homemakers don't really hire people to work with them. These
Yes.
are usually
Not
when
by
people
them.
who do. So I didn't see how this training was going to really help them find jobs with home bakers or maybe start something of their own. And I said, hey, you know what? I learned cheese making. Let's start a little cheese unit. And Anu, between the two of us, she is very level-headed and practical. She's so she looked at me and said, I'm not sure it's going to fly. I mean, how's it going to work? Um, should we do something else? I said, no, let's give this a try. That's it. So honestly, the industry, Bobby. You are very, I mean, whether it's cheese or coffee, I mean, you have got your hands and you know a lot about
Yes.
what's happening in the artisan food industry or somebody I've seen
It's
who's
called
very hands-on.
diversification of resources and incomes.
Sorry?
Diversification of resources and incomes.
So
But if
the
you want to put
artisan
it
food,
in a more millennial term, I'll say one life.
true. But for the way the business has evolved, very contrary to what I have always done before, where it's structure, there's a plan, there are things that you need to do. I have just kept myself open to learn, right from the skill to the business itself, because it's not an industry. We are not, though there are maybe a total of 30 of us in the country or less, we are not recognized as an industry as such, where even the food safety does not understand artisan cheese. They understand processed cheese. There is
Yes.
documentation because that's what has been done in the industry for a long time. So it's just been a very organic growth where every year, while I as a cheesemaker have learned a new skill, we've also realized that okay, this is where the market is headed, or just kept ourselves open to that.
So, because you're not recognized as an industry, there are challenges because you don't have any fixed standards to follow. You don't have any guidance to look for, or any documentation or literature to look for, or anybody to seek help from except your own community. But in a way, I think that also kept artisanal cheeses as a product uh, not become like a mass market thing, like processed cheese.
True.
Because had you been at a mass market level, you would have all the standards and all the documentation and everything. But because it's a small artisanal industry, plus there is a greater perception among people where it is believed that this is for all rich, fancy people.
It's
Do you
how
feel that?
organic it is, right? It's by, I mean, what we have done with the food system is we have pumped it, and I was just explaining it to, I think, my mother today morning, that over the years, people have lost the sense of producing their own food. And I don't mean cooking. That is also becoming,
Yes.
I mean, producing, right? You produce your own food, or at least you contribute to the food system. But what has happened is there are more and more mouths to feed and less people producing food. Yeah. So industrialized food has taken over. And you also know that post Second World War, where there was a huge need to feed the army and industrialize, create food that could last. When the war was over, the food still stayed. And regular people became the consumers. Today we term it as convenience, but all of these. So our relationship or equation with food has really changed, and the way we look at it is very different. When I started out, my whole thing was milk is permanent. Milk comes every day. It did not, even for some people educated, and it never struck me that yeah, how can milk be an everyday thing? There is a lactation cycle, there is seasonality, there is a natural way. So all this has been learning. From late 2016 when I started out in late 2018, we were like flooded with requests to retail and do stuff. I did not want to get into any of it because I thought, okay, I just don't know enough. What
Yes.
am I going to do with food? I need to be sure before I get out there and start talking to people and putting it in a place where I don't even have connection with the consumer. So we took our time, and even today things surprise us. But even basic things that milk is not meant to arrive at your doorstep in a bottle or a pouch every day just never struck me.
And unless you are buying a pouch milk, your milk is not the same every day.
Yeah, true.
And especially when you're going to make cheeses with it, you would have figured out that, okay, those variations can actually make a lot of good and bad differences.
It's not, right? So when I learned cheese and I came and this was for a trial, I managed to get the rennet and everything, and I put the rennet, and the milk was it just stayed as milk. And then I was like, what's wrong? It's supposed to work. I followed the recipe. And over the years, it's dawned upon me that cheese making is not a recipe. If you take a biryani recipe and perfect it over the years, you will actually perfect it because you're measuring it down. But cheese making is something that is not, it's a preservation technique. As the season changes, the milk changes, you need to be intuitive about the milk. So what the problem with my packet milk that I got was, it was UHT.
Ouch!
Yeah, I mean, the milk that I was UHT. And obviously there was no free casein for the casein structure was destroyed. So this rennet did not really form it.
Yes. So that's things you learned the hard way.
Yeah,
You should totally write a book about this. I'll edit it for you.
I will.
Okay. So I don't know how many of you know this, but Namrata got a very nice award this year for one of her cheeses. Cheese that I ate when I met her way too much, along with the other cheeses she offered. You offered. I can't say no. I will never say no. So tell us about
I like to feed people. That's my happy place. I like to feed people.
Yeah, but right opposite to you was the Subco stall, and they had cacao, and they had not launched it for sale. And they told me, we're not selling it, but you can try as much as you like. And I'm like, big mistake.
And cheese and chocolate go very well. You were there for the pairing.
Yeah. And you said I can try as much as I want.
Absolutely.
So I did. They said it. In my defense, they said it. Okay, so tell us about the award and what was this cheese that I'm talking about.
Thank you. This was a lavender infused cheddar, which was aged for about 12 months. So the lavender flowers, lavender is a very different flavor when it comes to flavoring food. It's not very common. I mean, you often find lavender in perfumes or home food, fragrance and all those things. But I have tasted in farmers market abroad lavender infused honey and lavender infused shortbreads, which are really nice. I mean, something that I have enjoyed. And what is really interesting about it is when you smell it, you smell the flower. When you eat it, it's something else. So for me, what I really love about artisan cheese and what I do is I love playing around with flavors. There's texture, of course, but flavors. And we have so many things in India. So I was doing a floral range where I was working with rose infused cheese and also the lavender. So this lavender is organic lavender from Kashmir. So when you're actually eating it, the first thing you do when you smell it, it's intensely floral. But when you eat it, it's like rosemary, it's grassy. Because the flowers don't really taste of anything. Right? There are the cheese that I found abroad, which are very popular in Christmas markets in Europe, which are all infused with lavender oil. Now, I do not like using essence and oils in the cheese. I like to use the spice or the flour as it is. So this was a surprise for us. We sent it to the World Cheese Awards. It's an international event that happens every year, organized by the Guild of Fine Food, which is based out of UK. And last year, there were about 4,300 odd entries from all over the world, from like 42 countries. And LF Perrier from Bombay got a silver and a gold for 2 of their cheeses, and we got a bronze for our lavender. So yeah, thank you.
That cheese is very good. Are you still selling it?
Yes, of course.
So people, please go and buy it. I am telling you, it is very good. It is an experience to have because your nose will say something different, your tongue will say something different, and together as a package, that experience is wonderful. I still have some of that left in my fridge back at my place. I savor it.
Well, somebody said, right? I mean, the wise man said that cheese is milk's leap towards immortality. So you show your cheese well, it lasts you forever.
It will last forever, but I will not last like this forever.
Well, you've had it for a very long time. You picked up the cheese in November last year.
No, February.
Oh, was it this year, Feb? Okay.
Cacao Festival, 18th and 19th of February at IFB in Mumbai.
Yes.
All right. What is the most delicious cheese that you have ever tasted? Could be yours, could be somebody else's.
There are many, but my favorite is like a stinky Epos. It's a washed rind cheese from France. It's just like I cannot have enough of it. It's it's one of those. Imagine like a camembert, but way more stronger and stinkier. It's sort of viscous. It's delightful. It looks all crinkled up, orangey on the rind. It's just amazing. So I have a thing for really pungent aged cheeses. What's yours?
Jesus.
You seem to enjoy all of it. Like, what's your favorite? I don't think I ever asked you.
For me, at a very basic level, I enjoy a smoked Edam.
Oh.
Anything smoked, I enjoy a lot. That's a basic one. But I also enjoy good cultured cheeses. But you don't get a lot of them here. I live in the heats of Gujarat. Not a lot of stuff here. But go-to and easily found is smoked Edam. I also had so this was at a wine festival again in Mumbai where I had a cheese three ways. It was one block, but it had 3 layers. One was red chili, one was black pepper, and one was smoked. Now what happened is in a theoretical level, it sounds beautiful. Like so many flavors. But when you eat it, there's way too much going on. It's like overload. So the concept was very good. Those 3 independently were very good. But together, when you take a bite of all the 3 layers together, it's too much to process. Because there's red chili, there's black pepper, there's smoked, there's too much going on. And in that, the cheese gets lost.
Yeah.
Because Edam has a very nice flavor.
Oh, it is beautiful, yeah. The nuttiness that Edam has.
Yes. So that has been good. And apart from that, I think that's about it. Yeah. But I'm open to try everything. I never say no to anything.
I know that.
Always keep an open mind and try everything. Then you can decide what you like. Okay, from your spread, what is your favorite cheese?
I'm not a huge spreadable cheese fan, but I think one that we do not offer right now. So what happened is as we grew as a company, we started shipping. We had to work on making stable products and not just one-off. Earlier, it was a small place in Chennai that people could just come buy their thing and go. We never ship. But caramelized onion ground with cream cheese is just insane. Like you blend caramelized onion nicely.
Making me want to eat it.
Sorry?
Just hearing about it is making me want to eat it.
Oh God, Bobby, it's so addictive. You cannot stop. You can't just stop yourself. You keep going back for it. Nicely caramelized brown onions. So that used to be one of our most popular ones, but it does not last beyond 3 days. So we still do it for events. And when the team does it, they keep a bottle aside for me. That's just, we do it for all our events actually. Wherever there's a tasting event and all that we do. And I tell people to buy cheese and make it at home. It's that simple. But caramelizing onion the right way is not that simple. So not many people try.
When is your next event? Where can we have this?
We'll have one when you come.
You tell me, I will book my tickets. You tell me.
We're supposed to do a coffee and cheese pairing also. So come over and we'll do one in Chennai.
But you know exactly who threw a spanner in it. Yes. It is when your body decides everything, I will only do. So crazy things happen. Now, a lot of people believe that cheese is a Western influence. It is not a traditional Indian thing, which I don't feel is true, but I'm not supposed to answer my own question. So, can you tell us?
Uh, okay, what is cheese? Cheese is milk preserved to
But
last.
you were asking me, मैं वाइवा कर रहे हो क्या?
No, well, to whoever's listening now and later. I mean, cheese is basically milk solids um, separated from the liquid through enzymatic process in a way that the life or the microbial thing lasts. We do not have to struggle with the carbohydrate, the fats, the proteins, take them and digest it, but the microbes do that job for us. As the cheese matures, the lactose is the first thing that's gone, converted to lactic acid, proteins are broken down, that's when you start, the physical cheese starts, proteolysis happens, and then when the flavors start coming out, it's the fatty acids, fats being broken down. So that's very simple, that's the complex thing that cheese goes through. Now, this has been my understanding. There are evidences of cheese making. So, who had milk? The pastoral communities or the livestock keeper had milk, right? And when you had the milk, there's no way that spontaneous acidification would have escaped you. Milk would have curdled, become something else. And then when the liquid part was separated and some salt was added, it was yum, it was sour, but it also lasted you much longer than milk could. When you dry it out, then it lasts you even longer. So there is archaeological evidence that cheese kind of thing and those cheese curds sort of thing have been found in Kutch area in a pastoral. Now we also have cheese being made like the churpi, the kaladi in Kashmir, the Gujars making it, the churpi, and these have been made for a very long time. Right? Now, when you look at it, there is now the enzymatic process that I mentioned was because of a substance called rennet, which is found inside the fourth stomach of cows or the so, and even in human beings, when they are supposed to have the milk, that's how the milk, one of the ways to digest your milk or breaking it down.
But you might
So,
also want to tell that nobody uses animal rennet
you,
now for
you
most parts.
can see that. So that, but today, because of science, there is microbial rennet, there is vegetarian or plant-based rennets, and there have been plant-based rennet for a very long time, fig saps, and so different cultures use different things for curdling the milk or coagulating the milk. Right? But in India, because of the perceived purity of food and all that, curdled milk or milk was not considered. So while we made a lot of khoya was one of the preserving thing, and the ghee and other things, we didn't really make much cheese. So it's not been made from like 5,000 years back where it stopped, and then suddenly the Portuguese, when they came in a couple of 100 years back, they got vinegar. That's when chena started, right? Chena or paneer and other things. But yeah, we just simply made cheese. It's not how we preserved our milk. But we have been exposed to it, and it's not like it's a very alien concept or eating it is going to do. We've been eating processed cheese for a very long time.
Yes.
That's not even good for us. But,
Yes.
so that's probably what we should stop eating more and get into eating real food. So for me, it's not because I make cheese, Bhavi, but one thing that I always keep talking about is eat food that is as real to natural food the way it's supposed to be. It does not have to be processed. I was just talking to someone the other day eating a bag of chips. The bag of chips had different colored chips. Green, pepper, carrot was orange in color, beetroot was. So the perception of this young adult was that he's eating vegetables. Okay, you're not.
Mm-hmm.
You're not eating
You can actually
vegetables.
eat vegetables just like that.
You eat vegetables. You can fry them and eat. It's not evil. But this is food, right? So it's about that. So cheese is one of the purest, nicest form of good protein and good, not processed cheese, artisan cheese, real cheese. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think we should banish that as a Western concept. But just like anything else that we eat, we need to be mindful and eat it.
Would you say paneer is a cheese?
So I was hoping you don't ask that. So in the Western world today, So I teach for the Academy of Cheese, right? I teach for a UK-based industry body. I'm the training partner in India. And when we were documenting cheese for the cheese library, they were like, we have to include paneer because paneer is a real Indian cheese. Now, here's my thing. The way I, as a cheesemaker, perceive cheese, if cheese is made through an enzymatic process, acid coagulation also happens, but cheese has enough microbial activity to keep aging it. Now, even if I were to make a cream cheese, I can dry out the moisture and age it. Now with paneer, you have basically taken it to a really high heat and you've curdled the milk. So the lactose stays, the fat stays, the protein stays intact. It's not no longer alive as such, and the paneer cannot be preserved. The paneer is going to start to rot. Right?
Rot, yes.
So
because there's no microbial activity as such. You killed all the microbes by boiling the milk.
Yeah. So but again, in the counter, this thing, if processed cheese is cheese, then paneer is also cheese. Right?
Yes.
I mean, I'm always told, why can't you make paneer?
People and give them a little perspective here. Processed cheese is basically making, say, a cheddar or a mozzarella or something, mostly a cheddar, and then you melt everything out in a big vat and then process it there, add some ingredients, and that's when it becomes, under that very high heat treatment, it becomes processed cheese. That's how you get consistency, because you can't have every block after block, tasting the same, looking the same, everything same.
Formula. It's a formula of milk solids to fats to salt ratio. Pulverize everything, bring it up together. So in fact, when you put cheese, melt.
I'm sorry. You'll have to listen to the sabzi wala. I'm sorry. Okay.
So
if anyone wants ringan or papaya, it's there.
Does your cheese melt, right? And why does the fat separate? So people get really, if the cheese packet goes a little warm, there is this beautiful yellowish fluid that's out. Oh my God, your cheese has gone bad. Like, no, there are no binders holding the fat together, so it comes out. But this doesn't happen in Amul cheese. Like, yeah, it will never happen in Amul or any other processed cheese because there are binders holding them really tightly. And they won't separate from themselves.
Yes. Alrighty. What is the weirdest or funniest thing that you've heard about cheese? Like a myth or something people believe or something that just sounds absurd or weird and is not true?
The everyday thing that we encounter from a lot of people is, oh my God, cheese is bad. It's too much fat. It's not for me.
Yes.
Then cheese is also equal measures of protein, which is probably good for you because you are a vegetarian. I mean, and we see a lot of people who are vegetarian, and so and people have different things that they say about cheese, or they have the perceptions of blue cheese. I know there is probably only one cheese in the world which has got live maggots, and it's a very hard to find, expensive, remote cheese. But I think a lot of people that have encountered this cheese of maggots know it.
Yeah.
I am not getting that exotic and selling you cheese with. So these kind of things. But I think today what has happened, and especially in the last 5 years, I've seen that the consumer is also becoming highly aware and evolved. And the more and more cheesemakers, see today Bangalore has got 3 odd cheesemakers. So what is going to happen is, these are people who interact with consumers, right? So, and we all talk a similar language. And the more we engage with, so we all follow a similar path. We do pop-ups in our hometowns. I mean, whichever is our local regional market. We do that. We encounter customers. Most of us don't really have a shop front, but we have some place where we meet customers. And the more we talk the same language, people are also getting used to hearing that. It's not all about what I have read from, or this is what Google has told me or YouTube has told me, and or I have traveled and I know all about cheese. It's also interacting with real cheesemakers. So I mean, we are way below the number of really how much cheesemakers we need in the country. We need a lot more people jumping into this and actually making artisan cheese so that they can talk about it.
I've heard some very funny things. I know people who believe that mayonnaise is liquid cheese.
No,
It
it's
is not.
not.
World of
Two very
difference, people,
different
world of
things.
difference.
Yeah, they're two extremely
Mayonnaise is
different.
basically emulsified fat. So if you're having actual proper standard mayonnaise, it will usually be eggs that are emulsified. If you're having veg mayonnaise, it will usually be soybean oil that is emulsified with maybe some binders and stuff like that. Every cheese can be made into a white sauce.
No.
Please don't do that.
Yeah, please don't
Namrata,
do that.
please don't do that.
So when we started out, every second question to me would
How to
be,
use it.
how do I use it? How do I? And I'd say, eat it. But then I also realized that in our country, for a majority of customers, cheese is an expensive accessory. You want to dress up your dishes by using a cheese, and how do you dress up by melting it or making it into a sauce, right? So can we make fondue? I mean, like, okay, why do you need to make a fondue? When you travel, you have enjoyed a fondue, that's great. But having said it, each cheese is unique, like what Bhavi was talking about, the Edam before, or a cheddar. These cheeses are unique in their own way because they have certain characteristics. I mean, if you compare, so I'm somebody who's also trained a little bit on sensory aspects of cheese. I like to smell it. The cheese tells you a lot about its place of origin, where the animals are from, what kind of milk. See, for in Kase, we are involved with cheese making in a couple of different places as well. Of course, we do it in Chennai, we do it in another place about 100 kilometers from Chennai, in Gujarat, in Rajasthan. These are different milks. They're different sources of milk. Some of them are farmstead, some of them are pastoral. That makes the milk very unique. So we've realized that, so, where it comes from, what kind of milk has a huge influence on the output. It's just the way we talk about wine or chocolate or coffee. So, but the moment a lot of them are volatile components, the moment you burn them, like, okay, you cook with them, all of that is gone, right? So, best thing is to sit down, keep the room, cheese at room temperature, taste it, enjoy that with a little chocolate, wine. There's a number of flavors. If nothing else on its own, with a little bit of cracker or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you also have to experience the flavor. So if you're going to eat it with other foods, a lot of time, and if you've not paired it properly, you will not get that flavor or that experience that cheese is supposed to give you.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you have
Yeah.
to eat something simple, like say crackers, and I don't mean fancy cream crackers, just simple salted crackers, you'll be able to experience cheese nicely. Or just cut it and eat it ऐसे ही.
On its own.
But yeah, to each their own, yes. And the weirdest thing I very often hear is, if you see how cheese is made, you will never want to eat it. Now you make cheese. Do you want to eat it?
Of course. I'm eating all the time. So I'll tell you about, my staff, people at work, I would initially like force them to taste every batch because you have to know what you're making.
No. Yeah.
It is not factory level consistency, and we do not strive for that. But you need to know what a halloumi is. You need to know what the cream cheese is. And it's been what most of the core group has been with us for 6 years now. The other day, I just happened to be in office during the tea time, and you will not believe this. The team makes a little cheese platter for themselves every single day and enjoys it with their coffee in the afternoon. When most of the cheese making is done, they have like little bread because we do a lot of platters and the same. Like, what are you guys doing? It's like, and this girl says, "Ma'am, we do this every other day, with our coffee. We just eat some cheese. We stop eating biscuits." So it's also something that you acquire. And earlier, they would not come anywhere near the blue cheese or when we started making goat cheese because there is this whole perception that it's smelly. It's like this. Let's not eat this, right? I've been working with the pastoral community in Gujarat, you know about that. And, these are the two cheesemakers, the boys from the Maldhari community. They have had no idea of cheese. They had not even ever tried even Amul cheese. A year down the line, they were hosting a bunch of students, culinary students from Ahmedabad. And this boy, one of the cheesemakers, is actually recommending, there's a girl who said, I don't eat blue cheese. We had a Roquefort on the table. And he was telling her, like, please try it. अंजीर के साथ या शहद के साथ try कीजिए. Blue cheese को जब आप मीठे के साथ खाते हैं, उसका स्वाद बढ़ जाता है. I cannot tell you how gratified I was.
Did you go and say what?
I was like, oh wow, it's amazing, Bob. It was such a great feeling, right?
Yeah.
But he has started enjoying his cheese. A chef would go on top of a bhakri.
That first leap. Once you take that leap and then you don't like it, it's still completely all right. But don't go in with preconceived notions or perceptions. Like, for example, blue cheese. Blue cheese is not blue. It is really not blue. It will also not make you feel blue.
Or black.
Or any color, actually. Blue cheese is just a class of cheeses.
True. And there's a lot of effort that goes into making it that way.
And it comes from different cultures and traditions where it is a very prized and sought after thing, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And every one of those cheese will have their own specific culture, bacteria, microbes that make it what it is. There's ways to have it. So it's just like exploring something.
A lot of that also comes from nature, right? So Penicillium Roquefort, for example, the Roquefort, the famous Roquefort cheese from Roquefort in France, is because of the blue strain of microbe. It's the same. It's a similar strain, or it's a Penicillium Roquefort that's there in many, like a Gorgonzola or the Cabrales or Stilton. But yet, depending on the terroir, the place where they are quite different from each other, as well as the milk, how it's made, right? So a Gorgonzola is a very moist cheese, so it's like it becomes very gooey and creamy. Stilton is made very differently. It's also made very stable so that it can travel. A lot of Stilton travels across the world. Roquefort is hard and stable again because it's made with sheep milk, which is way more denser than cow's milk. So all of that is unique, and the same cheese when it's made. Like, I remember very early on we were making this brie, and a person who was very well traveled and well meaning as well. He said, look, it's a good cheese, but don't call it a brie. It's not a brie du Mont. And I said, but how do you expect it to be a brie du Mont? How am I going to get that weather, that terroir, that cow's milk? A brie du Mont is because of all of that. If I'm able to replicate a similar,
you take like a simple feta. You don't have that fancy grease weather here, bhai. Or their milk, actually.
The perception about feta is that it's a fresh cheese, but it's not. Feta is the age of too much and brine. Which is why they're salty, and which is why they're whatever they are, the way, just because they're under brine, the skins do not form. So a lot of, and these are things which are not common knowledge, and we don't really expect people to already know about this. But sometimes what I find a little not so nice is people can be very dismissive and they say, we know about it. I have traveled to Greece and I have had this cheese, so I know what I'm saying. Like, no, you probably do not, because I'm the person who's spending my days and nights doing this and researching this. So probably give me a little more credit than that.
No, but he went to Greece now. He knows.
Why do you assume that I didn't go?
He assumed it. I'm assuming it's a he. I didn't even think it could be somebody else. Okay, people, let's not yuck somebody's yum, as Guru sir very nicely says. But then, yes, there are cultures, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are cultures in Greece, and I have not been to Greece, where they preserve the cheese in seawater. The feta is kept in the sea. for the brining, natural brining.
Yeah,
Sometimes, not every day.
yeah, I have been tempted to try that myself. Chennai has an amazing coastline, and go further down, the water is clean. So
do it. You should do it.
I want to, there's a category of cheese called washed rind. So I want to actually get inside, like way inside in a catamaran, get some water, and use that for washing it. Probably nobody will eat it. It will be left for me to eat, but
you don't tell people you did it in Dhanushkodi.
I mean, you know me. If I did something, I have to. It'll be out there.
Take a vacation to Andaman and do it there.
Nini, you know how they carry those jerky in holy water? I'll get the water from there.
Yes.
Easier than carrying the cheese.
You put it in your check-in luggage and do it. I'll buy that cheese. I'm telling you, I'll do it.
Done.
And if you run out of luggage limit, you call me. I will come and help you transport water. Okay, I think a lot of people are not getting our jokes, so we'll go back to our discussion. Some cheese need raw milk, some need pasteurized, some need cow milk, goat milk, sheep milk. Tell us more about it. Raw milk is safe to consume for everybody.
I will also let you talk a little bit about this, but I'll tell you what you are obviously somebody who's much more knowledgeable in this topic, and my whole thing is that do not drink raw milk, but raw milk cheese is not the same as raw milk. Milk and cheese are two very different things. Raw milk itself, if it's got some pathogens, if it's exposed, it's contaminated for whatever reason, there is a lot of lactose and the microbes and the pathogens everybody is enjoying and thriving. But the moment you start making cheese with it, you are doing so in a very controlled way. You are increasing the acidity, you're adding salt at a particular point, you're taking out. Now we all know that water or liquid is a major source of contamination. So if you take out the water, you dry out, you've only taken out that 10 to 30% solid, you've salted it, you've brined it, you're storing it and you're eating it, it's not dangerous to eat. But the raw milk could have caused potential damage. So raw milk and raw milk cheese are two completely different things. Now, while I do experiment with some raw milk and everything, but because of all the standards and I can't enter a competition, I can't do things if I work with raw milk. And also the food safety does not allow me. We have a state license, we have a central license because we do e-commerce and everything. I can't get a license if I work with raw milk. Let's put that way, right? But I have worked at a farmstead level with raw milk. I have worked at very controlled environment where I have got the milk, had a lot of checks in. So what happens is we are all dealing with microbes, right? So there is very little of it that you understand. A lot of it happens. But as long as you know your fermentation, so there is primary fermentation, there is secondary fermentation. And when you're controlling it and working with certain mesophilic bacteria which survive at low temperatures, your cheeses turn out extremely aromatic. Now, I'm also somebody who's traveled around. I have eaten a lot of raw milk cheese. So a raw milk cheese as opposed to a pasteurized milk cheese, the raw milk is a lot more vibrant and the pasteurized milk can be very flat. Also, what happens with pasteurized milk is you do pasteurized milk. So basically you clean out all the natural microbial flora and then you introduce a single strain of microbes to do a particular job, right? So there is no variety. So, and it is not about right or wrong. If you as a cheesemaker, and a lot of cheesemakers do that who work at a very large scale, they do not work with raw milk, they work with pasteurized milk and they work with something called DVI. Now, what I do is I do not work with DVIs. I have created my own little cultures because I know that the milk itself has got this variety. So I work with natural cultures. So we pasteurize, not UHT, but pasteurize, and then introduce a more variety of microbes into the milk. So that's been my thing. Somewhere you have to find a middle path. So that's been my route. So you tell us, Pavi, what do you think about raw milk cheese? And I know it's a huge topic, but
the first thing I want to say is please don't drink raw milk. Please do not encourage other people to drink raw milk. it is dangerous. I understand you have a itch to do something too funny, but this is not the kind of too funny things you want to do. Unless you really want to be very, very sick. But if you want a sick leave, there are better ways.
Sure.
Raw
So
milk
what do you
is
think about
dangerous. Raw milk itself is dangerous. You don't know what it contains basically. It could have any pathogens, it could have dangerous bacteria. And milk is like full of nutrition. So if it's nutritious for you, it is also nutritious for bacteria. But what happens, I think a big challenge for people using raw milk to make cheese would be handling milk. Milk itself is a very tricky ingredient to work with. You work with it every day. You know what I'm talking about. It is very tricky to work with. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong when you're using milk. And you will have no idea what hit you. So when you're working with raw milk, that is always a danger because it spoils very fast. When you have pasteurized milk, at least all the bacteria are deactivated. Plus, it gives you like a clean canvas. With raw milk, you already have a painted canvas. When I say painted canvas, I mean it has a lot of microbes in it.
Yeah.
When you
So
have
it's very
pasteurized it, you have killed most of it. So then you can add whatever you want to and then create what you want to without any hindrance or obstruction from the bacteria that already existed in the milk, which would happen in the case of raw milk. So if you want to use raw milk, you will require like top-notch, high-quality, extreme clean production, which let's face it, usually does not happen.
yeah, which as small cheesemakers also we don't have access to, right? So from, I mean, we could, if you're handling milk, you need to have a lab setup. If you're making cheese, you don't need to have that. And I think the least, what I have seen in India, for example, and with a lot of cheesemakers, is that understanding the microbial growth and culture is the last thing on priority, right? So you're basically just making cheese, and a lot of cheesemakers treat cheese making as a recipe, like I said, but it's not. If you do not understand milk, then that's a huge problem area.
Yes. And like I said, once you get a blank canvas, you can do whatever you want to do with it. Because most times your culture would be sequential. Every bacteria tries to survive. That is a normal survival instinct that every bacteria, every microbe has. They want to survive, so they will produce products that are deterrent to other microbes. So when you have a raw milk, every microbe present in the milk could be yeast, could be bacteria, could be even fungi. Everybody is trying to survive and deterring the other ones. And then whoever manages to win is the final product you will get based on that. Whereas that challenge does not exist when you're working with pasteurized milk. But again, the benefits of working with raw milk are your protein structures and everything is in its native state. So the final curd and the final cheese that you will be getting will have a different kind of flavor. Could be better, may not be better, depending on what Hunger
Depends.
Games happened inside your milk.
Yeah. And also your window of handling, what I have seen in my experience is your window of handling needs to be minimum. So it works best in a farmstead kind of environment where you have a lot better control. Right? I mean, I've had my own experiences of working with a particular farmstead thing where it's a single batch of 6,000 liters of raw milk.
Oh my God.
Turned into excellent sugar, but they have their own lab setup. They're constantly looking for moisturizer and things, and we don't have the luxury of doing that. It's a very expensive. As artisans, small cheesemakers, you really can't. But one of the things that we have put at Kase, for example, and for me personally, it's been very important to understand microbes and do a little digging in that thing. So we do on a quarterly basis. There is like on a rotation, every product goes in for a microbiology test, right? So it's not, I think the regulatory thing earlier was every year and now it's probably 6 months, but it's like a constant thing that a bunch of them come out and then we send the next lot just to ensure that there is consistency in that. We know what is happening with the milk. We are constantly swabbing our, right from our cheese molds to trays, people's hands, because that's another thing. A lot of people I've seen who see videos, for example, and cheese making, they're like, "Oh, you're not wearing gloves." What people don't realize that it's not. You you can't wear gloves, and we are working with heat. We constantly touching, and the gloves are not the most sanitized things. So we're constantly washing our hands the
Yes.
way the hot water, salt, vinegar, all of that to ensure that when we're handling cheese, we wear gloves. But while making cheese, it's not practical. You don't want that piece of plastic floating around in your cheese. So
I think a lot of times, and I'm not saying everybody does it, but it is like once you wear gloves, you go a little lax because
see, it's the
I
same.
wore gloves.
See exactly. So wearing gloves, I'm sure you've seen at a food event or something. People are really not mindful of handling money and food at the same time wearing gloves. I think that's a far worse problem. So when you're wearing gloves, you kind of think your hands are protected and you're touching things. But when it's bare hands, it sort of comes to your mind. We also have this alarm where keeps going off every hour so that people are mindful of just rinsing their hand.
Yeah. Plus, you working with milk. If you have a safety lapse, it will reflect in your product immediately.
Yeah. And cheese has
You
got
will
a
find
very
it
good
out in that
quality
lapse
of
itself.
not done right. You know, Bobby, with cheese, the moment it starts maturing, there are defects which are so, I mean, and they can't escape you. And honestly, we haven't had any defects in the last 5 years, but the cheese will basically just blow and burst. Okay, or it will
Yes.
start smelling so bad that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
just know something is wrong. Hmm.
See, that's the thing of milk. It's a very tricky ingredient to work with, but if you have a safety lapse, you will find out that same day itself. Milk is not very forgiving in that matter. Okay, now people find molds used in cheese to be off-putting or bad, and there's a lot of stigma and judgment, like we talked about, which
Yeah.
which makes people less open to try it, right? But that is often, like we mentioned, a product of years of tradition or culture, may not be yours, but somebody else's, and they produce amazing flavors. So, like, it may not be everybody's thing, but it is a good idea to keep an open mind and try it.
I
So,
think
is there something you'd like to tell people? It could be, see, if you have those furry moles popping out on your cheese, it may not be very welcoming to a lot of people. But what would you tell them that they can keep an open mind and still try to take a little piece and try it?
it's and I'll tell you, it's been really nice to see how attitude towards mold, at least in I mean, as a company, we're entering our 7th year, and we have, many good customers who have been with us for the last 6, 7 years, and earlier, if there is a spot of black or blue, people would immediately raise a concern. But over the years, I've seen the same people telling somebody else in the event, oh, this is nothing. But what I usually do is we do pop-ups and we do have these events. And you will see my cheese towers pop up in some Instagram grid and few other places. I like taking really moldy cheeses, piling it up, and talking about it. The fact is that you cannot make cheese without the microbes. And when they start being visible to your naked eye, it's because the inside has started to change. And you start seeing, so microbes essentially are your yeast, fungus, and bacteria. There are some really common yeast which are this white powdery thing that start coming on the surface of the cheese, and they are not harmful to us because they exist on our own bodies as well. They are there in the environment, they're there. What people need to understand is what is your fungus growing on, right? So if your fungus is growing on something which is wet, so if you see a fungus on your cream cheese, you should definitely throw it out, because that thing has a lot of moisture and it's not good. It's basically contamination that has happened. But if you see a fungus on a 2-year-old cheese which is on the surface, scrape it off or wipe it off and eat it, because it is supposed to be there. The other thing is you need to understand what substance it is growing on. So at the end of the day, the microbe is eating something and converting that into something else. So if it's on a good substance, it's converted that into something that is edible. But if you see a microbe growing all over a processed cheese, then you probably should throw it out, because the byproduct that is there is toxic. So we take a very blanket approach to all these things and saying that all mold, fungus, everything is bad. Food should not have fungus. But unfortunately, cheese is one of those things. In fermentation, I mean, we drink kombucha, of course it's filtered and you don't see the SCOBY sitting on top of it. But if there are no microbes, if there is no fermentation, then you don't have something that is healthy and edible. So yeah, I think having an open mind to it is necessary. And I think as makers, fermenters, cheese makers, whatever, I think we need to have these conversations as well, because we are dealing with these microbes. We are trying to control them. We are growing them in a good way. For the consumer, visually, you sometimes see it, you may not see it, but we can't not hide it from you all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And what are the one thing I'd like to mention? Every time you see cheese in Tom and Jerry, you see the Emmental cheese with the holes in it. Those holes are not made by human beings. They are made by bacteria that have grown and produced gas. Those are gas holes.
And
that
not
is
all
the gas that the emitted.
Yeah.
And
that's one cheese that should have the holes. They're made that way to have the holes. And a particular kind of bacteria called Propionic shermani. And they're made in huge, bulky masses, so that, getting technical, the primary fermentation has not happened and there's too much going on. And not every, again, one of the questions, why doesn't your cheese have holes? Not all cheese will have holes.
We did not have 3 people to come and make holes in the cheese. We have a labor issue. That's not how it happens. It is the bacteria that make holes. People do not do that. Okay. Now, what are the new trends that you're seeing in the market right now? Domestic, international, anything? Where is the cheese market going? And I don't mean the processed cheese.
No. So cheese market is definitely growing. And it's also because of my whole research and business background that I've had. I find it's good fun for me to interact with customers, understand buying behavior. So I do a lot. I still engage with customers, and I like to spend time understanding. So I was telling you that our retention rate is really good. But I've seen how the pattern has changed over the years, right? So there is a bunch of customers who probably came to Kase and shopped on the website thrice a month, which has probably come down to once in a month. And that's fine. And so these are also the people who love to experiment with cheese. Now there is a lot more that's being offered. So they know that they can order cheese from Himachal online, from Bangalore online. So they have now picked and chosen their favorite from each of these producers. And I think it's amazing that the consumer is having a lot of choice. Right?
Yeah.
Every other day I see somebody new coming into this. The reason I also started teaching, Bhavi, where I started teaching for the Academy of Cheese, was basically the way I look at it, it's my contribution to building this as an industry. For making something into an industry, you need to have people who are trained, who have some structure. You need to bring in some structure. So it's not only makers, but we need more people who can talk about it, who can sell it. There are retail fronts where you have cheese, but they're not people who are trained to even talk about cheese.
Yes.
As I'm planning to collaborate with someone and do some retail training, and I think it's really, really necessary because consumers need help in deciding. Cheesemonger, that word, which is not very common in India. It's primarily this person who knows very well about the cheese, but also understands the consumer's need and can make a match for the consumer. Yeah? We need people to understand pairing. There's so much that can be done.
Yeah.
India today is on the cusp of not just cheese, but we are now with sort of coffee, chocolate, and cheese, where wine was probably about 10 years back. Yeah. We know that India produces some really good wine now. It's taken its time. It's still evolving. But also we're getting recognized for our coffee, for our chocolate. We have been for cheese in a very small way. So it's great. The growth has been slow for the last 5 years, but I think the next 5 years are going to be amazing.
Yes. It's a good time to be eating all this stuff.
It is.
So, how is artisanal cheese different from a mass market cheese?
Artisanal, by definition, is small batch, hand produced. Yeah. But having said that, like I said, I have experience working with artisanal producers in the UK, in the US, variance of 1,000 liters of milk is artisanal because the machine intervention is only to mix through the cheese or cutting the cheese, but rest of the process is all done by hand. So it is not about the size of it, but artisanal as such, and there are no preservatives. It's made in the most natural way. It's made by people who locally source the milk and who are providing to a local market.
Got it. And also, when I say mass market, I don't mean just processed cheese, because nowadays I'm seeing the bigger dairies produce other cheese also.
True. So it is
Like
processed
mozzarella has
industrial.
become quite a mass market now.
Yeah. So when we talk about that, if you look at the market and how the segments are, there is of course processed cheese, which we know, and there are pretty large players. But because this has become so, cheese as a condiment, as an ingredient, is in high demand. There are large industrialized players also who do really huge volumes, right? So it's not processed cheese, but it's, say, for example, mozzarella is probably the most mass produced. They will have to have some amount of preservatives, fungicides pumped in so that they can have shelf life. And also, they're all machine made so that there is, on an average, all artisanal cheese makers, I understand, in the country today, as we make our cheese, our making cost will not be less than 700, 800 rupees if you're making small scale kilo. So how can you sell it at 400, 500 rupees a kilo? It's very unrealistic. So you need mass market players also like that, because there is a demand. But I also think that there is a market that is big enough for each of the segments. So when we are artisanal producers, we are pitching to that market, and we're not necessarily trying to take away from a processed or a mass market player, because it just doesn't make sense until and unless you reach that scale.
Yeah, absolutely. There's space for everybody. You just have to go and work and get the space, because nobody is going to give it to you. Cheese can come on a platter. Space in the cheese market does not come on a platter.
You have to work for that.
I did not have my morning coffee properly, I guess.
I'm having it right now.
All my gear is at my place. Okay, so we see a lot of fancy gear in the market. You have different types of knives to cut different types of cheeses. You have special boxes to store cheese in. You have fancy plates to serve cheese in. So many different things, and none of them come really cheap. And it can be very intimidating. Like, for example, you have bar accessories that can get very intimidating for people. Ke, ye chammach ka kya karu main, iska kya karu main, like that. Same thing exists for cheese also. And then there's a whole ton of videos and blogs who will say you have to cut at this angle and you have to do this. It's a whole very elaborate process, and it's scary. So what would you like to tell people? How useful are all these gears and knives and plates and dabbas and procedures and SOPs and everything?
I'm terrible when it comes to, I follow the most practical way of cutting and packing the cheese. So I have been told, you're not cutting your block properly. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know the right way, probably something. No, when it comes to like a maker, it's different, because you're cutting from a big block, we have to cut in a certain way, we have our knives. But as a consumer, I don't think there is any need for making yourself, being very cerebral or creating this whole, it's nice to do a little drama, and it depends on who you are, what kind of social event you're catering to. And today there's a lot of fancy things being done, and it's not just fancy for the sake of it. It's really nice. Sometimes you want to, today we have access to all of these things as well. So yes, if you can get yourself a really nice cheese board, get that. If you want some knives, they're also available. But look at the practical aspect of it. So for example, if you have a block of cheese and you want to scrape, and it's really nice when you take out those thin scrape, that is a knife for it. For a brie sort of cheese, which is soft and a little squishy, you really need that sharp knife to cut into it. And the end of it, you have a fork to just pick it up and serve it. But you don't have to find it so intimidating. You need to look at the practical aspect of it. It's, it's like fine dining where you have those 3 forks and you're thinking, okay, should I go from outside to inside or inside to outside? So
I
the
always
first
get
time,
confused. I'm like, to hell with it, just give me a spoon.
yeah, well, like if I'm
Only
and it needs a bigger knife and fork, I'll just go for it. It's like that. You don't
yeah.
have to, if you want to, there are enough tutorials, enough things about it. And today we have access to all of this information. So yeah, I would say figure out your cheese, get a nice cheese board,
Do
practical.
what works for you basically. Like, I find it very intimidating when people say, oh, between meals you should keep your knife and fork like this. If you like the meal, keep it at this angle. If you don't like it, keep it at this angle. If you want second helpings, you do this. I'm like, shit, man, I can't remember all this. I'm eating, I'm trying to enjoy my meal. I don't remember all this.
You can get out of it.
I've barely figured out which spoon and fork to use for what, because ghar pe to half the time I won't even do that.
So, well,
I'm somebody who cooks and eats from the same bartan, because then there is one less bartan to wash.
let's not say that aloud.
Okay, I just cook for myself and eat it. It does not make any practical sense for me to cook in one bartan and then take it out in another bartan.
Nice way of saying that, one pot meal, and you can, serve yourself in that pot and eat from it.
Okay. The only time I take it out of the plate is if my pan is non-stick. I don't want to spoil that coating. So, okay, I'll wash one more plate. It is okay. या फिर सूख जाएगा तो धोने में प्रॉब्लम होगा. See, be
Practical.
practical. Do whatever works for you. It is completely all right. Nobody's judging you. If they're judging, they're not invited to your next party. You can invite us. We don't judge. Namrata also doesn't judge. How should one eat cheese? Very important question.
How should one eat? Take a
Yes.
few,
Kaise should I eat cheese?
yeah, just on its own, find a good. So let's say there's some basics, right? So cheese can be breakfast, cheese can be an appetizer, and cheese can also be a dessert, right? Cheese is quite filling on its own. If you're looking at serving cheese for a snack or something, look at 70 to 80-gram portion per person. That's quite filling. Um, Not more than three varieties. I mean, of course, if you have a lot of people, you can experiment with five, but it gets quite filling. And it's always nice when it's enjoyed with a little bit of, depending on what the cheese is, like it be a little honey. So, for example, in the morning, ricotta is one of my go-to cheese. I just find it so amazing. In Italy, they don't call ricotta cheese, but for us, ricotta is a secondary whey protein. Instead of having whey powder, you can try a spoonful of ricotta. It's much more amazing.
Yes.
Sourdough bread, ricotta, salt and pepper. Like my husband Sundar loves something sweet, so he can have it with honey. He would love to drizzle honey in. So if you're having that, it's quite filling. If you're having cheese for a snack, a piece of cheddar, apple, a little bit of peanut butter or some jam works really well. So look at cheese as a little snack or a meal by itself, rather than an accessory to make your dishes more glamorous. There's a cheese called halloumi, for example. Halloumi is really beautiful when it's pan fried. A nice 50 to 60-gram chunk of halloumi pan fried with some grilled peppers or even regular sabji on the side, any vegetable. It's a completely filling meal. So if you look at it as something which can be your main meal or something, rather than just, of course, the cheese can go on the pasta and sandwiches and a whole lot of that. But I always encourage people to just eat the cheese on its own, which has been served so much. Okay.
We'll take questions after. I just have two more questions to go.
Sure.
And I think most of it is also something we've covered. So earlier, cheese was something rich, fancy people had with wines. Okay. And we still see pictures of vineyards with those nice cheese platters and Rubenesque glasses with some wine in it. And it all looks so fancy. But now you will have, like, I experienced it myself when I was with you at the Cacao Festival. We were pairing cheese with coffee. We were doing it with chocolate. There's so much you can pair cheese with, right? Like I had your Manchego and your provolone and that young cheddar that you give me. So it's all great. And how do you go about deciding what you can or cannot pair with cheese? Do you have some quick tips for
Yeah,
people? Very simple, easy.
yeah. It's actually not very. So okay, cheese and wine is something that came along the way. If you see or go down a little bit about the history of cheese and everything, it was probably cheese and bread which was had more often, which is quite logical because bread was made and then there was cheese that went on top of it. Cheese and wine is a more modern fancy thing. And yes, cheese works with a number of things. You can pair it with a number of things. Um, Anything strong would go pair with something strong. So if you're taking a sharper, stronger cheese, look at something which is stronger. If you have something very mild like a cream cheese or a mozzarella or a burrata or something, you need something lighter. So for example, let's say even about drinking. I mean, in a wine, what I'm talking about is a sparkling wine would go with a burrata. You know, the creaminess of the, it'll go with a white wine. But it would also work with a white rum or a vodka or a gin or a floral something, and it pairs really well with lovely aromatic mild teas, like think of a chamomile or so where your senses, your palate is not overcrowded with very contrasting flavors. But also we know that certain kind of contrast work very well together. So if you have something sweet, you can have a little salty. And cheeses essentially are salty. Most artisan cheeses are 2% salt, but as the moisture dries out over the next few years, they tend to become a little more salty. Salt becomes more aggressive. So if you're pairing them, so which is why salty cheeses also pair really well with a drizzle of honey or with a fig or something like that. Fruits work really well. I mean, I'm not sure grape is the best cheese to pair with fruits. It probably looks very good and it's always there. But pear, fig, apples pair beautifully with the cheese.
One experiment that I did with whatever cheese you gave me, and I think it was provolone, machengo, both worked out very well. What I did was I keep experimenting on recipes with cascara. For anybody who doesn't know, cascara is the skin of the fruit from which you get coffee beans. Okay, so I make a tea of that, and then I use it to make a lavender lemonade with cascara. So it's like a cascara lavender lemonade. So there's a lot of aromatics going on. There is a slight acidity. There's a sweetness in that. Everything is there, and that goes beautifully with cheese.
Yeah, it does.
It's just these two things, and it's a whole experience because all your senses are completely indulged in it.
Yeah. Cheese does this lovely thing of coating your palate.
Yeah.
Because of the proteins, the fats, the weight, it helps you discern a lot more flavor. So I always say during this pairing, the cheese is like the best supporting actor.
It makes your actor also shine. Plus, you have that little salt which doesn't overpower anything, but it enhances the perception of other tastes. Okay, so people, you have some fair idea of pairing. Otherwise, Namrata keeps doing workshops and sessions about this. So drop by anytime she's in your city, or go to whatever city she's in. That time easier. Now, cheese making is a tradition that you and I both agree on, and I also feel that some of these traditions are getting endangered. Would you like to share something about that?
It is. It's primarily the race to catch up to cater to a bigger market. In the moment it stops being, and okay, there is, I'm not being negative about trying to be large scale, but I think doing things small is not necessarily the most profitable way. Right? At the end, let's talk about the Indian context also right now. Every other day, I keep getting an inquiry from somebody saying, cheese making sikha dijiye. We want to learn cheese making. Now, I do have a module, I do teach, but there are things that I have learned along the way. And I know that there is no shortcut. It's a long winding road where you need to learn the basics. And my way of teaching is that here is the complete sort of architecture, but it takes so much time. You learn this and then you go on to the next level. And unfortunately, a lot of perception is that this is the industry that we need to catch up with. There is a lot of money to be made here. We start making cheese tomorrow, and the day after we're the most profitable venture. So
yes. So then you're rolling for money. You're rich.
A lot of these small artisan practices are getting lost because you have to catch up and be the next bigger name and be the mass market thing, be a retail brand. But I guess that's inevitable. It will happen, and some people will go that route, and some people will still stay on to become small batch producers. But can't do anything about it.
Yes. Now I have a question that a follower asked. Actually, there's two questions.
Sure.
One was, what are you doing to that in the picture? That's there on the poster that we announced the live in.
So a lot of traditional cheese were made, like Gouda traditionally is made in a wooden bucket. Wood is really good. It becomes like a microbial environment for the milk, and it's sort of, a lot of practices, they don't use a starter culture, but they just use the bucket over and over again, where it just washed out with glue. So for one of the cheeses, Gouda, actually, I was working with a wooden bucket, so it's a wooden pedal and thing. And the way it's heated up is by introducing hot water. So it was in one of my classes.
The person who asked me this question didn't even join the live, but it's okay. I'm assuming they'll see the recording later on. The second question I got was, can you make a mozzarella without rennet?
Unfortunately, the YouTube thing, and I've heard this question too many times. As far as I know, you cannot. The vinegar or the acid coagulated 30-minute mozzarella that you see is probably not mozzarella. Mozzarella, as opposed to what people think is one of the easiest cheese, it's extremely difficult, takes years of practice. It's just, the every cheese that is iconic, that comes from a long line of traditional practices. So there is certain respect that needs to be paid to that particular cheese for what it is. As far as I know, you cannot make mozzarella with vinegar or citric acid without using rennet.
I think you might still be able to curdle the milk. You cook it in the way, you'll still get a curd. You will still get some cheese, but it will not be the perfect mozzarella. That's what I feel. You can still get something.
Of course, I mean, you can acid coagulate and do certain things, but it is not. It is not mozzarella. See, Bhavi, the thing is, people have tried this kind of thing, and then they say, "Oh, it's too hard." It's that pasta fillet, that technique is all about spinning the cheese curds at a particularly high temperature, and also incorporating a lot of water or moisture in that. The real mozzarella, it's almost like that rasgulla kind of thing, juicy, and it's not going to be the same thing if you just do it.
I gave exams on this.
Of course. Yeah, so
it was huge pressure. दूध अच्छे से फटेगा कि नहीं फटेगा. So yeah, it's a lot of pressure at that time when you have to give an exam in making cheese. Way too many variables. So you have a whole huge vat, and then the milk is all cold, and you're adding your acid and your rennet, and then you're slowly heating it. You very carefully and gently, ekdam pyar se collecting all the curd, cooking it in the way. It sounds very easy and fancy, but it is not. Maybe if you have to do it for a day or two, or you're on tourism to a trip to a cheese farm and you're seeing it and you're like, oh my god, this is so fun. No, bhai, no fun.
And it's a lot of physical work, just like, it is. We have a couple of funny videos about that on our Instagram where you say cheesemakers have to be, I'm lifting 15-kilo wheels, and which is not something I do every day, but the fact is that your shoulders are being overworked. You need to work at a certain, and it's a lot of heavy lifting.
You have to bend down for long periods of time.
Cheese making actually isn't the difficult part. The cleaning is.
Oh, it is very difficult. Plus, like I said, milk is a very tricky product to work with. It is very unforgiving. If you do not do your cleaning properly, your next day's batches will be ruined. And you will realize it after the cheese is made, not pehle.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of challenges. It's not all fancy and beautiful and lovely as the pictures would show. There's a lot of challenges that people face. And there's a reason why artisanal cheese costs as much as it does. Nobody's becoming rich here. Namrata, are you rich?
We will answer that later. not, not by selling cheese, not yet.
It's a lot of hard work basically, and it takes years of practice to perfect things. You can't download a recipe off the internet or even take a recipe from a cheese maker and then have your own fantastic cheese the next day.
True.
Because now you will be at a stage where you will just see the curd or see the milk and be able to say kya gadbad hua hai,
It takes
right? But
a long
that
time to
comes to you from
understand that.
experience.
It's when I work with my students and they make mozzarella, and I always, that's one cheese I warn them that, see, we may not be able to get it today. And it's fine, it will. And with some, we get it the first time and it's ecstatic. And then I tell them, listen, if you don't get it tomorrow, don't be disappointed.
Yes.
You will have to keep doing this until you understand your milk, you nail down certain things. Only then you will be able to repeat.
Unless you worked with milk, you don't know how complex an ingredient it is. Because it has so many components and it behaves so differently in different conditions.
Yeah.
For example, you add the same amount of acid when the milk is at say 10 degrees, and you add the same acid when it is at 37 degrees, and you add when it is at 60 degrees. The state of milk will be different at all three temperatures.
Yeah, that and also see, all cheese making. If you pick up a book and you are looking at cheese making as a recipe, every cheese will tell you warm up to 32 degrees, add a culture,
Yeah.
there is a ripening time,
And
and
it's
then
all
you add it. And then it says waiting time. So, for example, acid coagulated cheese like goat curd, like the chef, for example, most of the recipes, because they're written by somebody abroad and it comes from a cold country, would say 15 hours, 20 hours, 18 hours of coagulation.
India, it'll be it'll start rotting by then.
Now, the people have actually followed and done it here, and they're like, I don't know what's wrong, but it just comes out like, yes, because what is 15 hours for them will be 5 hours for you. Yeah, so we forget the cheese making is a lot to do with, so it's not a recipe that can be used in isolation. It keeps changing.
Yes. And it has started raining here. Okay, you want to take the burrata question that somebody asked? I'm out of questions.
Tell me what the question was again. I did see, I don't see it anymore.
I'll show you. Wait. Can you talk about burrata cheese, which is being served so much in restaurants now?
So burrata is basically a stuffed mozzarella. I mean, it is a form of, it's one of the pasta flavored cheeses, and there is stracciatella, which is shredded mozzarella with cream that's mixed and stuffed into it. And suddenly it has caught everybody's fancy and it's being served everywhere. But probably it's not a cheese that you should be eating every single day. And doesn't have
or
to
with
be on top of it. I mean, I can understand a risotto or a pasta, but then I see it on pizzas, and I think it's too wet for a pizza. But
it looks cute.
It's nice. I mean, I'm somebody who's in awe of this perfectly little pouches and so beautiful, and it's a thing of beauty. But I also think that it's being overused in a lot of different things where every cheese has got its place. And today, I think in India, currently, the mozzarella burrata space is just bursting. There is
Up.
a lot of demand for it. You cannot escape that. Any cafe you go to, small, big, 5-star, it's on everybody's menu. So yeah, I mean,
And there's no other questions. There's a few people who've said hello. Like I think we had Aruna say hello, but I don't think she's on anymore.
I just get
Hi
to
everybody who said hi. Okay, so we have a question saying, which is the best way to eat it?
I assume you're asking about the burrata. I think it's really great on a salad. It's so fresh. It's so beautiful. It's extremely delicate. Just enjoy it with nice crisp greens. So for me, as a person, I always look at cheese and I want to celebrate that. It's like the master chef thing. You make the cheese the hero. So,
Yes.
so you
Hero
don't have to
ingredient.
drive a lot of ingredients, flavors, or anything. Enjoy the cheese, crisp romaine lettuce. I love burrata with rocket, a little bit of balsamic drizzle. I honestly don't enjoy it with a bread or something which is too heavy on its own. So
Yes.
that's how I eat it.
Basically, whenever you add whatever cheese you want to add to whatever you want to add, or want to have it with whatever you want to have it with, just see that whatever you're having is able to get through to you. It should not get hidden beneath the layers of flavor
Yeah, I
or
mean, don't
texture.
do if you buy expensive artisan cheese and
Do
these cheeses are
justice
not
to it.
cheap. Just have the cheese as one of the major. I mean, don't hide it. Don't make it an accessory and don't melt it. Nothing against it. You can do all of that. You can use it for cooking, but then celebrate the cheese a little bit.
So if you still want to make a white sauce out of it, please go ahead and do it. See, do what works for you. Nobody is judging you for it. But we'd say have the experience of what it is intended for, what it brings to you. You spend money on that very expensive cheese, brought it home, enjoy it.
Yep.
It is good to go for things that look good aesthetically, but it has to be practical as well. We are not denying that. But you can't hide the flavors beneath layers of something else.
True.
Then you're not doing proper justice to the ingredients that you used. I think that's about it. This is one of the longest lives I've done. I did not even realize it was 12:30.
Thank you. As
So
always,
one
it's
and a half
nice.
hour of a life. I went out to the walk with you, but then it started raining, so I came back and sat down.
Thank you,
But thank
Bobby.
you for everybody who hopped on and hopped off. We saw you going off, okay?
That sounds like a threat, but no.
But okay, I understand. 1.5 hours of patience you did not have. We understand.
It's you and I talking away and having fun. So
We can do this all day. We can literally do this all day. And everybody around us will get like, what is going on? You remember last time was the first time we met and we didn't stop talking
I know people around us thought we knew each other for years. So
for our whole lifetime, but we were actually meeting for the first time.
great.
Anyways, people, go have some cheese, pair it with some nice coffee, with some nice chocolate, with wine, with whatever you want to have it with. Have fun, keep eating cheese. If you want to buy cheese from Namrata, what are people supposed to do? This
Well, go check out
is your time to shamelessly plug in your business. Do it.
casecheese.com. And if you have any questions, there is a little chat thing. So always feel free to drop us a message and we'll help you out, whether it's pairing. We have enough pairing notes on the website as well. The new website looks great, so go check it out.
Yes. And what are the cheeses you recommend from your spread that people should buy immediately?
Feta chili
Whatever two
garlic,
people are doing in their life.
the cheddar. I think cheddar is really great. So the 40 different things to choose from. I'm sure you'll find your cheese or will help you find one.
Wonderful. And how soon do you ship it? Do they get it the next day? Do they get it next week?
Monday to Friday, the shipping is done. It's Blue Dot Airways. So all tier one cities, I mean, metros and tier one cities. If it's like we get some odd orders from a Himachal or Dehradun, we ship it out only by a Wednesday so that you get it by Friday or Saturday. Weekends, there is no shipping. But most of the orders reach their destination between 48 hours from the time they order. So yeah. If you don't, if there is a problem, public holiday or whatever, somebody from our team will call you and tell you that. But yeah.
All right, people. So you know what to do. And with that, we end this live. Thank you, Namrata, so much for doing this with me.
Thanks.
I don't know about others, but I definitely had fun.
So did I. Thank you.
For the whole 1.5 hours, I had fun.
You too. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you, Namrata. Let's meet soon and have more cheese.
Have a good Sunday. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.